Let's assume I have a glass of water here and I drop dust or ink into the glass of water. What happens to those particles? What motion does it obey?
Okay, so that actually is a much harder problem than you might think at first glance. The reason being that they tell you about very tiny particles in a liquid or in air doing sedimentation. But in practice, when you drop a collection of objects into a fluid, if you drop a drop of ink into a fluid, for example, the phenomena you see and the random motion you see isn't sedimentation. It's typically turbulence. Isn't Brownian motion, I'm sorry. It's usually turbulence. So in order to do experiments in which the only random motion you see is because of the thermal motion of the molecule, you need to actually make sure that some other things aren't happening. There aren't straight temperature gradients, that there isn't such a big density contrast between the objects you dropped in and the surroundings, that it's moving fast. So if you take a drop of ink and put it into water, you see a spectacular cascade of vortices, not Brownian motion. It's actually turbulence. That's a whole nother fantastic branch of physics, which I won't really talk about because I don't directly work on it. Okay. But
let's say we've controlled for those.
You control for those. It's tricky. For example, some of our school textbooks I've seen lie about this. If you have a beam of light shining into a dark room and you see little dust motes running around, you'll see them dancing around. Brownian motion? No.
Everything's been a lie. My textbooks from beginning have been lying to me.
These little dust particles are way too big to have been kicked up there by thermal energy. If you ask about it, there's a really negligibly small probability that thermal motion alone would have kicked a dust particle to a height of a meter. No chance. Okay? The dancing movement, you'll see, you need to learn what is and what isn't Brownian motion. It's good to do a Brownian motion experiment, and those dust motes are too big. Brownian motion is something that you're going to see significantly only in micron-sized particles. Dust motes are, probably 1/10 of a millimeter or something like that. Okay? Secondly, the air in the room is turbulent, and that's what you're seeing. To see Brownian motion, you have to work a little harder. You can see it. It's easier seen indirectly by shining a laser beam at a very still suspension like milk or something and looking at the reflected light, or looking through a microscope. But, too many caveats in everything I say because I'm very fussy about precision.
No, makes sense. Okay, so let's assume we have controlled for all of that. What would Brownian motion be?
As you may or may not know, people observed Brownian motion by taking finely divided particles, taking not pollen grains. Pollen grains, again, you can see pollen grains with your naked eye. No chance of they'll have insignificant Brownian motion. Too big, too heavy. Robert Brown burst the grains of pollen from a plant called Pulcinella or something like that. And those in water, he saw them dancing around. He saw them dancing around because they had already, by the early 19th century, had nice microscopes, and he sees them. The reason it became important is kind of a long story and really requires doing a bit of maths. But what he saw there in samples that were too small to have thermal gradients and convection, in things that were very still, so turbulence wasn't happening, all those things, he saw these things dancing around. And they dance around and jitter around very, very rapidly. What's happening there is that each particle at a given moment is getting kicked by the collisions with the ambient molecules of the liquid. Those molecules are dancing around because the liquid is at a non-zero temperature. Temperature is just random kinetic energy of these systems. And that random kinetic energy kicks these particles around and you see it as Brownian motion.
So movement is random?
It's random.
Completely.
If you look at sedimentation experiments, two things are happening. Assume even in the sedimentation experiments, everything is so slow that turbulence is not happening. Okay. It's settling slowly. So there is a mean motion, which is just the mean motion due to gravity. That mean motion is a particle subject to a force, namely gravity, reaching a constant speed because of an opposing force, namely the drag due to the fluid. Gravity, particle is heavier than water, so it settles, but it doesn't go on accelerating even though there's gravity because there's another force. So once it reaches a speed at which the drag force balances the settling force, it's going to settle at a constant speed. If you look at the motion of that particle about that mean steady motion, the horizontal motion, of course, will be purely random. The vertical motion on average is downward, but with jitter up and down. And the famous experiment of this was by Perrin in around 1906. it was important, as I said, for a reason that requires my doing a bit of algebra, which I think is out of place during this talk. Okay. The thing to keep in mind, and the essential feature of Einstein's understanding of Brownian motion, was that if you've got an object in a medium where lots of random things are kicking it, if you put that object there and don't make it move, then on average, it'll go nowhere because completely random things are kicking it. If you impose a velocity on that object in one direction, then conditioned on that velocity being on average in one direction, if you ask about what kicks it gets, it'll get more kicks from this side than from this side, right? If you impose that it's moving this way, it's going to get kicked more from here than here. As a result, it's going to get slowed down. So the same random motion that does purely random things to the particle on average does biased random things if you bias its motion, right? And the reason, therefore, that this particle gets slowed down by the medium is the fact that if you're moving in a given direction, on average, you get hit more in the face than in the back. And so the origin of the drag on the particle and the origin of the random motion of the particle are the same. One of them unconditioned, the other conditioned on the particle that being moving in one direction.
But at t tends to infinity, are we going to reach an equilibrium state?
So yeah, if you let it go, if you don't keep pushing it, its kinetic energy will on average be the same as the kinetic energy of everybody else.
Okay, so over time there's some target state it's going to settle into.
Yeah, and the target state is just that it's just a big molecule. It's got a bigger mass, therefore it'll have a smaller speed. But its half mv squared on average will be the same as the half mv squared of everybody else in the room.
And the movements within, these are completely random. It's like random walks that it's performing. The movement at time t+1 is not dependent on time t.
Yeah, right. I mean, you'd be a little more precise. The velocity increments are not dependent on it. The point is that the particle has a mass, therefore it has inertia, so it will tend to keep moving in a certain direction.
Yeah, the velocity is not. It's almost like a Markov chain, but continuous.
So it's the velocity updates are Markovian, if you want to use the And in the limit where the particle's mass is small enough that damping dominates, you can use a description in which you forget about the mass and you just think about the displacement doing random motion. The sedimentation problem, it turns out, is much more complex than I would let on just talking about one average motion. Yeah. Because if you have a collection of particles moving through a viscous fluid, each one disturbs the fluid. Those disturbances disturb each other. Yeah. They interact strongly and at long range. And that is one of the problems I've done a lot of fun work on.
Because this is such a fun show, we are going to dive into your fun work.